What if there might be an entirely different way to play Rise of Kingdoms that none of us have been thinking about? Instead of going for kill points, you just try to make really tanky armies, run them far into the enemy's line, and try to just shift where the front line is located, because you know that there is no kingdom in the game that has the discipline to avoid chasing kill points. It just is what it is. So the genesis of this video is twofold. First and foremost, you've actually seen this in my live streams where someone will say, I'm blade running. This is like a Smash Squad term, okay? Where they just run far into the enemy's line, they all go chase them, and then the whole front line of the battlefield moves. But also in 2377, I asked for video ideas in the Kingdom chat, and this was one of the ideas. Chisgule, cook up some tanky marches. What would you run if you were going to go pure tank? And, you know, look, I think most kingdoms look at kill points when they assess whether or not they want to bring you into their kingdom. So this is a risky route to go. But for the sake of just like, hey, is this a thing or not? Let's put together the tankiest marches and army combinations we can muster. And I'll be eager for your thoughts down below in the comments for where we land on these different combinations. And there is one other thing that was a motivation for this video that I want to call out, which is that in Call of Dragons, the different troop types, in my opinion, mean more, in part because you can physically stop someone from going somewhere. And in that game, I've actually considered running full 5x infantry and being that guy that like helps move the front line. So I've actually thought about this a lot, even in different contexts. So let's go and build 5 of the tankiest armies we can muster. Maybe we'll get to 7. And let's jump into Tier Maker to make this a little easier to visualize. All right, so I went and I pulled out the commanders that I think are candidates for being in this super tank army configuration that we're coming up with. Most of them won't make the cut, but I wanted to just pull forward all these different commanders that we might not normally consider, because the criteria is totally different here. We're not really chasing kill points. We're trying to just tank, which means damage taken reduction is huge. Counterattack is more valuable because, okay, I know we're not chasing KP, but let's like not be irrelevant here. And normal attack focus could also be really good because your normal attack boosts increases the damage you deal when you basic attack and when you counterattack. And I think infantry are going to be a very obvious focus for a lot of these armies. Why would that be the case? Because we have commanders like Charles Martel that do 30% counterattack. His museum buffs give him a ton of attack too. We have commanders like Pakal, right? Like all these armies that you typically cheeseburger with could be good in this context. And so counterattacking, shield, high health, like these are the sorts of things we're looking for. And you can see I've got like Richard I and I've got Constantine in this like list of commanders where like, hey, yo, these could be really good. Things like the defense talent tree, things like the support talent tree, I think also could be really good. Like I'm inclined to think that Constantine probably ends up being a primary in one of these configurations. In fact, I would bet you Constantine with Liu Che actually ends up being a thing that we end up running in this, you know, configuration, because we know in Canyon it works very well, right? And it might even be one of the best examples I can come up with of an army that we know is tanky. In case you didn't know, the meta in Canyon is to run Liu Che primary, Constantine secondary. And the reason you run it that way is because it does more damage. But, you know, you could make the argument for this situation, the support tree is more tanky. Maybe that's what you want. You get the idea here. So these are the sorts of commanders we're kind of interested in. And while we're on the topic of infantry, I'm very inclined to like pull down a few other commanders that I think could be very complementary here. For example, and we'll have to figure this out, but Skippy Prime has a shielding effect that he'll do when he is taking skill damage. So I might put like Skippy Prime over here with Pakal. There's a little bit of an anti-synergy, but we're just using this as a placeholder. We'll move stuff around. We're going to bring Ragnar down. And you're like, Chisgule, Ragnar, he's a DPS guy. Yeah, but also he leeches attack off enemies. So when people are hitting him, he's going to steal their attack, which is pretty legit. And already I feel like for infantry, we've done some very tanky, very annoying to hit, but also you can't really ignore these sorts of armies. So I think those could be really cool. And that's actually assembled a lot faster than I thought I was going to do. That is really surprising how quickly I landed on those. There are other infantry commanders that I really want to add, so we're going to have to figure this out. I really want to put Richard I somewhere. I wonder if William could go somewhere, William Wallace. We'll see. Now, the next question that becomes pretty obvious is, like, can you even get a tanky army out of another troop type? And I think that's genuinely a fair ask. Like, is that even really achievable? And one army that I'm intrigued by, it could work, is, of course, we want to have Shajar and use her as a secondary. Like, of course we do. Because on her 4th skill, not only does she reduce damage taken by like 20%, but just like Constantine, she's going to pop a really big heal and then reduce her damage taken by like another 40% for 8 seconds. Perfect for this run-in and tank situation. And it's funny because we know she has to be the secondary. I wouldn't pair that with Asher Benapal. I wouldn't pair that with Herman Prime. Weirdly enough, I think that Zhuge Liang for now becomes my placeholder because he's got 35% health. Right? That is a huge amount of health. And if you haven't seen, in my Canyon defense, I use this army, and it is a interesting combination of defensive capability and punishing attacks. So I feel like that, for now, is a placeholder I will work with. Which brings us to Cavs, man. And it's funny because I wouldn't with a straight face, I think, run Attila in the open field today, given what we know about the meta, but in this configuration where, like, you're going to run into the enemy's line, you're not just going to walk around like a bozo. Like, you are going to use your active skills. You're just going to try to push behind the enemy line and be one of the first ones in. I wonder if Attila has an opportunity here to do something. And so if that's going to be true, I don't know. Am I crazy to think that I might use Arthur and Attila? Is that totally crazy? I'm not sure. It genuinely might be. I think that Joan is like not tanky enough. I think that Huo even is like, he's just going to get crushed, man. I don't know. I wonder if that does it. The other thing I'll point out is that Nevsky could be good in this situation because when you get targeted, he is going to have a chance to trigger a health boost, which is pretty meaningful. So I almost feel like either Arthur with Nevsky or Arthur with Attila here could work. And I don't know how else you get Cavs going. Like, I actually don't know how else you get Cavs going. There is like someone like Honda Tadakatsu. There is Julius Caesar. And you might be like, Chisgule, why would you use them? Well, they have more troop capacity, but also Julius Caesar reduces damage taken very dramatically. On his 2nd skill, once you get low, he starts to do an extremely meaningful damage taken reduction. I'm not saying it's amazing. I'm just saying, like, how are we getting tanky here? That's an option. And I just don't know where I would put it. I would say, like, wouldn't that be interesting to pair with Shajar? But the issue is that, I don't know, if you had leadership gear for primary, would that work? Is that the better option here? Like this? Caesar with Shajar. I just don't think anyone's got that, right? Like the leadership gear. I don't know, man. I feel like this might be where I'm at, with the exception of probably we do need to include Richard I. And I wonder who we swap out. Is it Ragnar or is it Skippy Prime? It probably ends up being the Skippy Prime. And it ends up being something like that as the configuration. And that march is kind of much more tanky than all the others, but I think if your goal was to frontline, this would be a pretty compelling breakdown. The only other option here that we would consider instead of the Zhuge Liang would be the Henry. Let's go look in game real quick and remind ourselves, like, what would Henry bring to the table instead of Zhuge Liang? So the active skill gives you skill damage taken reduction, which is cool. You do get a little bit of a defense boost. This skill is only when you're attacking a city or a stronghold, so that's not relevant. Your archers deal more damage when you're hit with a basic, 10% chance to deal direct damage. I mean, it's okay. When you're over a certain amount of rage, you deal more normal damage. If not, you take less normal damage. It's okay. I mean, we're talking about Zhuge Liang as the alternative, who we know his damage is going to be way higher from active skills, but also he's got, it's 30% health. I thought it was 35, but whatever. 30% health is still really good, right? That seems good. Oh, and he has a chance to negate control effects. Bro. Yeah, that's pretty good. I think that might be where we're at, actually. I think that's pretty legit. All right. I think we stick with that. The only other thing I think I might mention is that instead of Ragnar, you could consider the William. Because if you know the enemy is going to be targeting you, okay, he does extra damage factor to things that are targeting him when he uses his active skill. And also he's going to shield, which seems really good. So depending on how aggressive you are, I feel like this combination could actually end up being better. And it lets you focus on normal damage instead of skill damage. Yeah, I mean, I think we ended up just benching a lot of these infantry to go like this. And that seems pretty legit. Oh, the other thing about the Attila is you can't get silenced. Oh, yeah. I think that we end up using the Attila over the Nevsky for this hilarious exercise. I think if we're making 5 armies, chat, this might be it, right? And I know I haven't really talked about Alexander the Great, so let's just cruise through the list of commanders that I included up here, but we didn't bring them into the 5 marches, okay? That includes Alexander the Great. He's got shielding, he's got cool effects, but Alexander the Great here, I think he's too squishy, right? You remember back in the Guan Alex days, if you were around, too squishy. Ashurbanipal, this is not his role. Philip is way too squishy, bro. Like, he is not tanky. There's a reason that he's not used in Canyon for frontlining, and this is it. He's actually pairs well with DPS, but not tanky. Want to emphasize that. Then you've got Leonidas, who's got his last stand effect, which could be kind of cool. That's why I pulled him aside, but I just don't think he's good enough to make muster here. But the effect is very cool and was very tempting. Then you've got Boudica, who also shrugs off debuffs, but otherwise her kit is like not all that impressive. Joan is too squishy. Huo, I think, is too squishy. Although I think you get health and shielding on Hera, I feel like he's just kind of suboptimal for open field in general. Then you got Herman Prime, who's just not going to be tanky enough. Belly Prime's just not going to be tanky enough. Mulan offers some really good buffs, but I think you're going to be ripping so fast, I don't know that it matters. So in Canyon, when you're lightly focused, that shines. Here, I think you're going to run out of marches to be buffing pretty fast, so I don't think that quite makes muster. You've got Honda Tadakatsu. Now, why was he even a consideration? So he gives you troop capacity, but also he makes it so the first like 57 normal attacks, you dramatically reduce the damage you take, which is kind of hilarious. But I just don't think his kit is good enough to pair with any of these commanders. Would I attempt it? Yes. Do I think it's probably good enough? No, I don't think so. Caesar, we talked about with his second skill. Let me just remind you how this works. You take 10% less damage, and if their troop has less than 60% of units remaining, whenever you're hit with a basic, you have a 10% chance to reduce damage received by another 30% for 3 seconds. Now, it does have a 5-second internal cooldown, so that's not so amazing. But then over here, you also get, it's a 30% damage boost. Yeah, the active skill is not as relevant. The 20% defense is nice, but I don't think it's quite good enough here with these skills. I think he's almost there, but not quite. All right, then you've got Skippy, who's like ton of stats. I do really like that, but I don't think he's quite prickly enough to do what we want to do here. Henry, we already looked at. Ragnar was a strong consideration. I would still consider that. And I think for like frontlining, this would be fine. I think this could be it. Now, if we get a look at the commanders I didn't include, by the way, just to like double check, is there someone you missed? Obviously, we're not going to bring the Seagen. You could make an argument over here for Pyrrhus. I don't think that's it though. If we look, these are some rallies and garrisons. No, that ain't it. We're not bringing in Esong or YSS. I don't think that's it either. Trajan gets tanky, but he has to live long enough to get tanky, and he won't the way this sort of series of armies will get played. You could look at Takeda, but I just don't think he makes the cut compared to the other calves that we have here. Looking further at this row, I don't see anything else. Moctezuma does not make the cut. Juan is way too squishy. Harold is also just too squishy. He, at first blush, seems like he's doing what you want, but he's just not. He doesn't cut it. He's not good enough. I get that he'll do like lots of axes swinging around. I mean, it's like cute enough to be put in the candidate list, but I don't think it's good. I do think it's kind of funny though. What else? Who could we have considered here? I don't think Mehmed makes the cut. He's not prickly enough. Cyrus is just way too outdated and doesn't have enough to make him relevant. CJ is deeply irrelevant, and I don't know that they'll ever buff him enough to change that. Looking at this top row, you've got Bertrand, who doesn't make the cut. Artemisia really doesn't make the cut. Ethel's not it. Yeah, I think if we're making 5 armies like this, hilariously might be it. Hilarious. If we were to try to extend this, which is a bit of a stretch, to 6 armies or 7 armies, what could you do to get that done? And I think you probably end up pulling the Richard for the defense tree to be a primary somewhere. That lets you bring in a couple commanders. First of all, you're going to get your Ragnar back in the lineup. Probably put it like this, where Wallace is with Pakal, and then you've got Martel with Ragnar to try to crank the damage there. And then you probably put Skippy with the Richard. I think that might be how you do it. There's not really a synergy there, but it's fine. And now you've gotten to 6 marches. If you wanted to get to 7, what could you do? Man, this is a stretch. But I guess we could bring in our cute but not so amazing Harold. And that means we almost like need another primary army here. And I don't know how we're going to get it. So we've got Wallace, and like it could be him. But like, who are we going to pair with Wallace? I mean, is this actually like a memes now? But like, do you actually pull in Leonidas so that when that gets low, it just lives for a little bit longer? Is that it? Is that what you need to do? I don't know. Like, this army is kind of missing the survivability that it needs here. So is the Herald army at this point, I would argue. But if they're going to focus it, at least he's going to throw axes around. It's just like, I don't know. He's 2,000 damage factor. Herald is 2,000 damage factor short of relevance, I would argue. Like if his active skill did, instead of 1,200 damage factor, we're talking about 3,200 damage factor, he would be he'd be meta in the open field, right? That's the most skill damage on anybody. But like, I'm saying that's what it would take to make him meta, if you understand. And I don't think he's not there. You could do Caesar. We talked about this. I don't like it. So like this could be a combo, but I'm not there. I don't think Philip is real. I just don't think he makes muster, man. He enhances damage. That's awesome. But if we look at Philip's kit really quickly, let's just talk about what would have to be true for this to pass muster. I think there actually is one way to do it. All right. So the thing about Philip is he's going to increase your damage dealt and reduce your damage taken, but like not by much, like 20% less damage taken for your army. That ain't it. I think the only way you can make him work is if you go with archers. So I think that's what we're going to have to do. And I think I'm going to revise the Zhuge Liang pair to instead have Philip primary. I actually think that could work. I actually do think that could work. And you'd need to, you'd almost want to consider running multiple troop types. I don't know if Shajar is kind of compliant with that. Let's find out. Is Shajar compliant with multiple troop types? Yes, actually. I don't see if you only have archers in this army. So yeah, I think we actually figured it out. Let's jump back to tier maker. All right, we got there. It took me longer than I would have liked to realize that we run Philip with Shajar, but I think that's actually way better. That's a big improvement here to this list. That's actually, I think that is a very meaningful boost. And now obviously that won't stack with the Constantine buff, but that's fine. So what else do we need to do here to this? Geez. So we've got Martel, who's got health, defense, and shielding and counterattack. With Ragnar, who's going to do big damage, but also sucks attack off the enemies and has defense. You've got the tankiness of Pakal with the prickliness of Herald, which, like, very sus, but we're going with it. We've got the Canyon Champion, Constantine and Liu Che, in this configuration for more tankiness than damage. You could run it the other way and get slightly more damage than tankiness. I think that would be fine. Then you've got the Philip with Shajar, which has a lot of synergy. First of all, you're going for all that archer health. Second of all, you're going to go for all the healing synergy in the talents from the Philip. And I think that actually could work. And Shajar is going to be doing that massive damage taken reduction once you get focused, and you will. For what is it, for like 40% extra damage taken reduction for 8 seconds when you hit a certain threshold, and she's got a big heal. And she's going to be healing everybody as you go. I think that certainly works. I'm very sus of these calves. I think they probably are just not going to cut it, and I don't know what to do about that. Definitely leave some comments for like how could we make a Cav army? Like, I don't think Attila Takeda's it either. Like, I don't think Takeda solves that problem. If you're wondering, like, what would be better? Is it, you know, or Arthur with Attila, or is it Attila with Takeda? I don't think it's Attila with Takeda, right? And I don't think it's Attila with Nevsky either, by the way. So I think the Arthur ends up just being better, even though he's not overly tanky. Very sus of that. I mean, everything here is kind of sus. What are we talking about? But the goal is different, right? And then you've got Richard, who does he's got a lot of tanky stats, good counterattack, big damage debuff that he applies to enemies in a fan shape. But then also you got Skippy, who will give you some shields, and he's got just the sort of gamut of stats. He's got all the stats. And he does reduce skill damage taken. And this last army, actually, this one's really sus. I don't know if we... So how does this work? Let's go look at Wallace and his kit and Leo and just laugh about this for a minute. So this is what I was talking about earlier. When he's getting targeted, he's going to do smite damage to 3 enemies targeting him. So in this configuration, when he uses active skills, which are going to happen pretty quickly if he gets focused, and he will get focused, you're looking at how much damage factor? 3,300 damage factor in total, right? It's 300 times 3 plus the 2,400. Just saying, right? Funny, not amazing. But he does have 10% health. He's got attack. It's not really what you're here for. He's going to make it so you do big smite damage, which is good. He does more smite and normal damage, and he is going to make it so that you cleanse slowing effects and apply mighty shields. This is the piece of the puzzle I'm very interested in. So let's see if Leonidas is going to be a good enough pair here. I think there might be a strong need to relocate the Wallace here. So, in fact, you know, he'd do pretty well with like Martel as an example. I think that would maybe be a better pair, but whatever. If we go down to Leo and see if this is doing the thing, what do you got for me, buddy? So we're going to have, a 30% health boost. The smallest, most irrelevant amount of damage factor on the face of the earth. That's what he's going to do. So that's actually the most cringe active skill on the face of the earth at this point. What else does he do? If he's got infantry, he's got 30% defense. Okay, gains rage. He's going to start shielding himself when he's hit with basics, which seems good. And is there... Oh, there's an internal cooldown of 4 seconds, is what it is. What else? He's going to give himself a damage boost, which is fine, launching basics. But then when he gets low, he's just going to live for a while. And like, I think this last army hits the cute but not good threshold of power level, right? I don't know if we can fix this problem. There might be a way, like how we figured out finally that like Philip really belonged. And Hana Zadakatsu, I keep mentioning, right? Like, why would he be good? Well, 57 times, you're going to take 30% less normal damage or basic attack damage, which is pretty good. He's got extra troop capacity, which is cool. But the rest of his kit, he's not tanky enough, bro. He's not going to cut it. Who are we kidding? There's always Saladin. Is Saladin the pick for pure tankiness? I mean, he takes 30% less skill damage. I just feel like that's not quite enough. 20% defense, 30% less skill damage. It's again, like not quite enough to get us where we needed to go. Joan only has 10% health, so that is just like not gonna cut it at all. We know Pakal does cool stuff, right? Everything he's doing is completely on plan. I don't think you're bringing in someone like Xeno or YSS. Like these garrison heroes, that's not where it's at in my opinion. Is Hera the answer we're looking for? There's the Mighty Shield. There's a 30% health boost. More skill damage is not really where it's at. Yeah, I'm not really convinced that Hera's it. It's not terrible, but I'm just not convinced that's it. Geez. Yeah, and then what is Philip giving us, or sorry, Arthur giving us for his tankiness? He's got 20% health. I mean, that's good, right? Well, what else do we get? The rest of it, he doesn't really do damage mitigation. He's very squishy. Ooh, it's pretty cringe. I don't know. I think this is where we land for our list for now. Let's jump back to it. I guess the one commander you could consider actually is Gorgo. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but that's like my last ditch attempt to maybe save this army, and I don't think it can be done. But what if we went with Gorgo instead? All right, my final last ditch effort to put something to this. We'll look at Gorgo's kit and then wrap the vid. So for the next 3 seconds, Gorgo's going to deal more normal and take less skill damage. That's on plan, right? She's going to give herself an attack boost, but a normal damage boost too. Okay. 30% health when you're in a garrison. Yeah, whenever you deal smite damage, you deal more normal. I mean, she's prickly. And whenever you're below 50% of units remaining, you're going to start gaining shields and reducing the attack. I mean, I'm not happy with any of these choices at the end of the list. 7 marches is feeling like a stretch to me. Anyways, leave a comment. How would you improve the 7 march ball that's designed to tank, where you really only sort of care about dealing damage? It's more about being able to live for a bit and distract the enemy while not completely sucking. And some of these kind of do. Right? Like Richard Skippy. These are the most sus combinations I've ever assembled in my life. GG. If you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, subscribe. If you got any other video ideas, definitely let me know down below in the comments. I'm certainly eager for them. And if you're looking for a more relevant list, I'll give you something that you'll find more helpful. The best 5-5-5-1 commanders in Rise of Kingdoms. Or even just my overall tier list for the state of the game right now. It's January of 2025. Check out either of those videos. I think you'll enjoy them. And until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies. Take care, everybody.